Yeah, I think you, Pankaj, you and I need to exchange notes as to why we can't be imagined together after this call.
I agree. I agree. But that's Deepa's imagination, mind you.
Morning, everybody, and welcome to the Lumiere Learning Monday. And it's a damn good thing when you log in and you have the panelists laughing, so you know you're going to have a good time. This is weather such on a Monday morning. I would normally be fretting, saying, "Are my Learning Monday guests going to reach on time?" First of all, I wouldn't have thought of both of these gentlemen coming to the office on the same day, because there would have been one Learning Monday dedicated to Ashutosh Tiwari and Cosmos strategy consultants, and there would have been a separate one for Pankaj Bhargava, and probably we would have also asked Shruti to join. Shruti, hi if you're watching, and said core creators के लिए अलग एक event बनाते हैं. But the way things are, and I was thinking कि नहीं यार ये these are two sides of the same coin. And I'll tell you all in a moment why we are starting our business unusual or business as unusual series with these two gentlemen in exactly a second. I'll just make quick introductions and then we'll dive into listening. So Pankaj, welcome. Ash, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Deepa, for having us over.
Yeah, thanks, Deepa. Reciprocate the same.
So they were curious to know why we wouldn't have thought of them in the same context. And I'll tell you all why in a moment. So Ash, we met when he was our client at Godrej. He was looking up SMG, the Strategic Marketing Group. And you go into the meeting knowing that you're going to meet the head of the Strategic Marketing Group, Ashutosh Tiwari. So you start the meeting, Ashutosh. And by the time you're out, and before you've even finished probably the second half of the meeting, you don't realize when you've started calling him Ash, and Ashutosh and the formalities have gone out of the door. And that, so, that's Ashutosh live wire. He's been a friend and we followed the journey. We're also associates. And for the last 5 years, after brilliant stints and superb work that we did, even did something together when we were helping him do some consumer immersion in Nigeria, has pivoted and created something beautiful, very, very interesting. And he interestingly calls his company Cosmos. Now, Cosmos, I think in terms of outer, global, all out there, so top line, market, consumers, geographies, government. Pankaj, we met, and Pankaj has been the Lumiere organizational coach. We met, Pankaj first came to our office on the 31st of December 2012. And I remember a conversation saying, Pankaj, this is not an ordinary meeting. Something phenomenal is going to come. And we did some really amazing transformation work thanks to Pankaj, who is alumnus IIT Bombay, IMC, has done some amazing work with Marico and the Marico transformation. And we were meeting someone who is, so phenomenal just in the way he asks questions. So today Pankaj is going to be a little uncomfortable because he's on the other side and we are going to ask him some questions. He is the one who always asks questions which are soul searching. He's also made me cry. Not too many people have, but that's Pankaj for you. And today he has, again, a phenomenal company. He has been, again, working in the global space, but his company is Core, and COE, which is the registered company, Center of Excellence. So Core is all about the inside. So for me, between both these gentlemen, it's really the inside of the organization and the outside through Cosmos that we'll probably just start our series with. So that's why both of you are here today.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks a lot. This was overly kind, I must say.
Yes, it was kind and nostalgic. Thanks.
So just because CORE has R and COS comes later, I'm going to ask my first question to Pankaj because R precedes S.
Okay. Well, that's a start.
So, Pankaj, you were mulling over with your team, global team. You guys were sitting down and talking about saying, what are some of the questions that possibly businesses need to ask at this stage? What kind of soul searching? We are trying to do a lot of exploration. So What was the process, what for you, in terms of the top questions that were coming to your mind in the context of people and internal?
As in the current situation or in general?
Yes, when we kind of went into lockdown and this whole thing had started, for you, what were some of the top questions that were coming into your mind, Pankaj, and your team?
Sure. So two areas really, Deepa. One was the fact that post the lockdown, willy-nilly people had to work from home or at least think they were working from home, right? And they've gone through an experience now for a couple of months. And so it was very important that if the organizations can start reflecting on what are the things that they plan to do work from home,
Okay.
or in a manner got done as work from home, and then look at which of those were easy to do, which were difficult, so that they could reflect on that to figure out what are the things that enabled them to be able to do effective work from home and things that didn't make it so effective. Because going forward, that would then help them decide which of the things could continue even post the lockdown as work from home, and things that they need to prepare themselves to be able to do it differently should such a situation arise again. So that's one piece which I think organizations need to reflect on and learn from the experience that they have gone through. The second really is the reality that a lot of business has slowed down, and getting it back to normal or getting it back to scale and growing it is going to be a crucial question for everyone. So in that context, if they could reflect in terms of the challenges that they see going forward, and again generate ideas in terms of what ideas or what things they need to do differently going forward to be able to deal with those challenges. And then the ones which are going to be easy to deal with, that's fine. The ones which are going to be difficult to deal with, they find a different solution and act on that. So really, these were the two areas. One, learning of around work from home, and second, preparing for the new normal or going forward to get back to full scale.
Sorry,
Deepa, you're on mute.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So Ash, let me just come to you. Similarly for you, what were things that you were pondering about? And I know you all have been putting out, thought leadership papers consistently since the lockdown. So want to tell us a little bit about what you and your global associates were thinking about, and what is it that you had as questions to ask, and what is it that you were figuring out as some of the big things that were leaping out to you as you all were mulling from the top, and the outer?
Sure. I think obviously this is a tragedy of massive proportions, right? There's no denying that. There's a lot of distress. There are lots of challenges.
Yeah.
And almost as a counterpoint to it, one of the first things that started striking us that this problem is too big to be handled by just treating it as a problem, by just for in management language, just by cutting costs and conserving cash.
Nice.
Right? By just managing the denominator. This problem is not going to go away until unless you are enterprising enough.
Correct.
Until unless you can find new sources of revenue. Until unless you can find new revenue models. And you talked about a lot of global associates, a lot of our clients. Broadly, in our experience, around only 1 in 5 right now have the attitude to be enterprising, to look at the opportunity side of things. 4 out of 5 corporates are caught, unfortunately, like deer in front of headlights, right? They're completely frozen. Wow. In fact, one of our clients, when we were talking to them and we said that, we did a massive transformation for you 1.5 years back. And now we also did a long-term strategy. One part of that long-term strategy was about going digital and virtual. You may want to fast track that. And, they kind of agreed, but still they could not bring themselves around to acting on it, because it was like, let's see, let some business start coming back, let some cash start flowing back, then we will look at it. And I'm like that, unfortunately, they are about out of home entertainment. They said you may not survive that long, right? So that's, I think, one part of the story. That's number one, that the opportunity enterprising mindset versus a challenge tackling, cutting costs, shrinking your space kind of a mindset. The second thing, and it may sound a little odd, because the moment such a discontinuity happens in society and there's so much of distress around, it is kind of difficult to tear yourself away from that and look at it holistically. But one of the first few things that started screaming at us holistically was that society is going to go through a massive transformation.
Yes.
Literally on steroids.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
For example, the whole country has got a crash course in DIY. As we know, India is not a DIY culture, right? You want everybody else to do your own job. And suddenly everybody is doing their own job and kind of discovering it's not so difficult, right? In that sense. On the other hand, for example, people have got a crash course in being digital, as I said. So there's significant forces of transformation which are transforming society, which also represent opportunities on one side. What's interesting to see, are businesses agile enough to figure out business models in response to that? So those will be the two aspects that I would say shouted out. One about businesses and their orientation, and the second about societal transformation representing an opportunity.
Very, very interesting. Thank you, both of you, gentlemen. Pankaj, just building on what Ash is saying about the whole readiness of organizations being frozen, the whole attitude which probably comes from a space of fear. So, intuitively, you need to do something, but then there's like just like the probably the pulls of the parachute and what's really the anchor. You kind of need to loosen some anchors very quickly so that the hot air balloon can rise. So what are you observing, Pankaj, through this? Ash says 1 in 5 businesses seem ready. 4 in 5 are in, like deer in front of the headlights.
So, interesting that Ash spoke about this. I've had a slightly contra experience. So quite a few of the organizations that we work with, in fact, are beginning to say that, look, this is actually going to be the best year ever.
Pardon?
Right? This is going to be the best year ever for them.
Okay.
And some of them, of course, are in spaces that are essential commodities and therefore are seeing a huge opportunity, undoubtedly. However, there are some who have been impacted severely, but are nevertheless finding different ways to look at it. Now, the difference that I see, and there are still others who, as Ash said, are caught like a deer with headlights staring at them. The difference that I find is where the leaders have chosen to, in the past, to be the sole thinking point, where they carry the burden of finding all the answers. They are struggling because the rest of the organization is then waiting for answers to come that they could act on. And in a distributed scenario where people are sitting at their homes and not being able to talk to each other, see each other, it becomes that much more difficult for the communication to happen, right? And one person cannot monitor so much. However, in situations or in organizations where they have got into the habit of distributed thinking or of involving people, different people are finding different solutions.
Okay.
And that's where I think they are relatively more agile than the ones that are caught in the scenario where only one person does the thinking. So that's the difference that we have observed.
So two things. One is the industry sector, and second is what is the level of dissemination of leadership within the organization.
That's
as
right.
Being some factors which are creating the a response or otherwise. Ash, any thoughts on this aspect that Pankaj is talking about, which is the industry and the leadership mindset within the organizations?
Yeah, sure. That's, I think, a very good point. Thanks, Pankaj, for raising it. I think there are two aspects that I would kind of build upon out there. Even the ones who are not caught like deer, they are agile, but a lot of them are agile on the cost front, not on alternate revenue sources, revenue model front. So there's the one nuance out there, right? In that sense. And when I was talking about 4 in 5, I was more referring to those who are not working at all on the revenue side. They are much more agile on the cost side, right? Because they are gripped by fear and anxiety. But there's a second point to it, I think. And it's not a secret that Indian economy hasn't been doing really well, right, over the last 3 years, even pre-COVID. And to that extent, there has been sluggishness in significant sectors even prior. Now, what has tended to happen as a consequence of COVID-19 is that quite a few of them are more like, okay, as it is, things were not going well, and now kind of the bottom has fallen out. Right now, yes, there will be a time for reflection, there will be a time to think about things, but let's wait, let's allow these things to stabilize. Right, there is way too much discontinuity, there's way too much chaos, there are way too many factors and variables at work right now out there in the marketplace. We don't know which ones are lasting, which ones are not. So let's kind of, let's hold tight, and a time will come when we start thinking about what to do. Now, that may serve some organizations well, some not well. Second thing, I think I directly want to touch upon what Pankaj talked about, which is more leadership percolation. I think that's an excellent point. An organization survives as a consequence of diversity of not just inputs, but diversity of thoughts inside.
Yeah.
And by definition, even 100, even a 20 strong organization, and we are not talking even about the thousands of strong organization, but even let's say a 20 man count organization will have a fair level of diversity and mindsets. Yeah. The key question is, are they willing to listen to all those mindsets and give them space? Because even if let's say the promoters or the management or the stakeholders are in this kind of hold tight space, there would be few people in the organization who would be seeing opportunities in their own micro operating areas, and they can be aggregated. If the organization is empathic, is listening, I think there's a lot out there. If, as Pankaj said, they're all very unitary and their whole decision making is driven from the top, and homogeneity and coherence is the driving word, then I think they would take a much longer time to come out of this.
Yeah, I think great point. And I really love the way you make the separation between agility in the context of managing costs as well as on the revenue side. And the other point, the really important point, is how diversity could actually get leveraged in very interesting ways if you allowed it to happen. Thanks for that. Pankaj, you are working with organizations, and you mentioned the points of work from home. There's a huge amount of paranoia, extremely long hours of work, a very sort of a schizophrenic, view that we get. So there is, on the one side, huge amount of efforts to do employee engagement, do fun, do parties, bring your drink, be okay if, do a lot of celebrations, bring in bohemi in your team. And at the same time, there is this whole sense that, I don't even have a control over my Saturday, Sundays. I mean, what do I do if a call gets set up at 7:30 and I've got kids, toddlers, and I've got little kids, and I've got elders. And so you kind of see a huge amount of stress. Everybody's trying to do their piece, but probably not pulling in the right direction. So what kind of guidance, because of course, you can't separate one from the other. At this point in time, it's all integrated. So.
Yeah, so, this is kind of my favorite topic in a way, that, when organizations are monitoring tasks, okay, then they're really concerned about how productive people are or they're not. Right? And in that case, they end up setting timings to work from this to this, and morning call, daily hustle, daily meet, follow up, review, set up meetings when we need to, and then things start to get messy. Well, the reality is that yes, for a lot of people, this lockdown has meant taking on tasks and chores at the home front, which they were not doing earlier. Right? And so being able to balance the two is becoming important. Now, if the organization has clarity about what kind of output they're seeking from the individual and give them that flexibility of when they could deliver on that, it wouldn't matter. Now, by the way, that has got nothing to also do with lockdown. The same can apply even when there was no lockdown or in a normal scenario. But organizations which have not managed to work on that culture are struggling the most. So they are really getting hassled that, look, there are people who are not doing tasks. How do we monitor whether people are there or not? So morning 9:30, we want to see you on the computer. You should have logged in, and evening you will have a daily huddle and kind of discuss what's happened. So in those scenarios, and then when the task is not done or the objective is not achieved, then the desperation to do it even on a weekend or whenever you want to do it, and that's when all these issues start. And from my experience, actually, the day-long if there are multiple sessions in the day that happen over the laptop, it can be quite exhausting for people. So these are aspects which hopefully the organizations will learn and realize. And if they come to that point of realization that going forward, focus more on agreed output and deliverables rather than the inputs that individuals are or the tasks that they're executing, and monitoring those tasks only, chances are that this will begin to ease.
So there must be a fair bit of churn on that front, and I'll just stay with you for a moment to just say that how does one create this discourse, because today there are lots of webinars happening. So are you seeing this starting in the last 3 months where people are now saying, look, this is broken down, the way organizations have been trying to get everybody to become effective and efficient in the last 3 months is putting too much stress and adding to the strain on the system?
So yes, some organizations are beginning to do that. I mean, honestly, the number of organizations I've interacted with is not that large for me to comment on whether it's really beginning to change or not. Yes, the articles one reads are beginning to suggest that there's fatigue happening and people don't want to get into that. But with some of the organizations we work with, we've often had this conversation about, look, what is it that you really want to monitor? And eventually they do agree that, look, it's more the output and rather than the effort or the actual input and the task. In those cases, they're beginning to start defining what output they want. And as they begin to do that, greater clarity is emerging. That's a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. If you haven't been prepared for it, just the lockdown is not going to make you end up doing that. So that's the other piece of it.
Thank you. Thank you. Ash, you have worked with diverse teams, creative people all along, even in the various roles. You just have a knack to embrace diversity. You do it not so much as an organizational mandate, but so much so as a personal belief is what I've seen of you, Ash, and the link that you've seen and built to very great outcomes, even at Godrej, to from really bringing in a new, energized, youthful mindset towards creative problem solving. Now, a lot of it presupposes people coming together to work. Now, in lockdown, we are all at home. If you were in Godrej at this point in time and we were in this situation, I mean, would you wonder what you would do on this aspect of how do you get people to come together? How do you keep the engines of creativity and innovation burning? Would something get hurt and hit? If you can just rewind, and I'm sure you've thought about it, tell us your thoughts on this aspect, specifically on people FaceTime, getting people to clash, getting, conversations over coffee, and how that might, the whole creative innovation process and what is happening and the risks.
Sure. See, I think it's a thanks a lot. It's a fairly interesting point of view, and which is also linked to what Pankaj said earlier. In a lot of ways, what we believe is that distance has become a bit of a currency, but it's a nuanced currency. The moment you talk about distance, people imply physical distance. Okay, I'm not able to see, or I'm able to meet only sporadically. No, not necessarily so. Today, for a lot of people, as physical distances have increased, their need for emotional intimacy has also increased manifold. Right? Just for a moment, stepping away from the corporate world, what you would find that many more people are connecting with their alumni, with extended families, with friends, for weekly games every Friday, every Saturday, right? There is this, so as the physical distance has increased, the need for emotive distance has actually increased, and hence those distances have actually decreased. Right? There's also a lot of empathy going around. Right? That empathy is not just for the migrant workers who I don't know. There's a lot of empathy for people that a self-employed professional, or somebody who's on the verge of losing a job, or somebody who has fallen ill, or somebody who's was an outdoor person and is kind of feeling very mentally anxious, right? And normally in your humdrum of life, you may not have cared for them, but now you are kind of reaching out. So first of all, this whole thing about physically not being face to face actually leading to some kind of a schism or a chasm in working emotive relationships is not really true. It was probably true in the first fortnight, but Indians, being terrifically enterprising, figured their way, you know, kind of around it in that sense, right? So I don't think that has and as we go further and further into this phase, because we believe that work from home, even in a post-COVID scenario, is here to stay. Its nature would change. In fact, almost paradoxically, we believe that the focus of work from home will shift from senior employees to middle to junior employees, just because of economic reasons. Because the value created per square foot of real estate that you, let us say, uh, you give to an administrative staff in the eyes of an organization is lower than the value per square foot generated of real estate that you give to, let's say, your CEO. So why would you pay for precious real estate for administrative staff, right? Because they can work from it wherever. And they are relatively, even in a task-focused organization, to borrow Pankaj's analogy, they are easier to track, right? And normally they're not believed to have the maturity and so on. So for as a consequence of different factors, what we believe is that this will actually evolve to a scenario wherein the seniors may be more like work from anywhere, maybe come once or twice, 2 days in a week to the office or whatever, but thereafter work from anywhere. While a lot of administrative staff may transition to compulsory work from home, which is not very unlike the BPOs in that sense, right? And as a consequence, the world, and especially Indians, will get more and more used to that. If the last 4 months are any indication of the alacrity with which they have taken to it, I think they are going to go exponentially up the curve in the future. In that sense, yes, there is a question of not used to it, people calling in on Saturdays, Sundays, but at least as a consultant, I can say that there are enough people now beginning to set those guardrails. Okay, I'm not taking calls after 7:30, or I'm not taking calls. Maybe a Saturday morning is fine, but post Saturday lunch till Monday morning, unless it's like really something critical, I'm not. And this pressure is not coming from the individual. This is the interesting part. This pressure is coming from the family. So it's the family pushing back against the corporate and this employee in the middle. And the family is saying, hey, excuse me, when you are caught up in a call, you're not contributing in home. And on the other hand, in a way, our whole life is also disrupted. When you are away from home and sitting late in office, at least you could go on with our life, right? In a 2-bedroom apartment, we can't really go on with our life. So they push back and they say that, no, excuse me, there need to be guardrails. And that's interesting.
Nice. I think that's really nice. So still, there's a part of my question that I still want to know. I mean, were you glad that you are not in a big corporate and being on your own, or would you have thought, knowing Ash, ke maza aata to see ke what would I have done with in the global scenario of not being able to travel, and how would I have been tracking what's happening in Argentina? Tell us about what went into your head at that time.
Well, frankly, nothing, if I would be honest. And the reason is, probably I got a 5.5-year training for COVID-19, because in the last 5.5 years that one has been a consultant with clients pretty much across India, Sub-Saharan Africa, Far East Asia, UK, etc. Working remotely and working from anywhere has been a very big part of life, right? So personally, and not just for me, even I speak for all the rest of the partners in the firm, this wasn't as big an issue. In fact, we were much busier trying to help clients navigate the issue. So to give you an example, in the beginning, for the first, I think, 3 to 4 weeks of lockdown, HR functions in different organizations were hyperactive. And the reason was very simple, not just because, okay, they were concerned about the employees, but also because, okay, these guys are earning salary, working from home, operations are shut, there is no work to do, we better have them doing something valuable. So let's do training, right? And lots and lots and lots and lots of training till training was coming out of everybody's ears, right? In that sense. And people were like, I have to attend this session, I have to attend that session. And we kind of intervened for some of the organizations and said, you know what? You will never get such a time wherein so many people can come together in reflecting about the organization. Is your organization truly self-aware? For example, one of our IPs, which is like, no organization, no individual has strengths or weaknesses. They have attributes. Some situations they become strengths, some other situations the same attributes become weaknesses. So we helped a few organizations. Why don't you utilize this to do in a democratized manner some soul searching about which attributes define you, and in which situations will they become strengths, which situations will they become weaknesses, and where does this current situation fit in, right? And some of the organizations which did that in a more democratized, inclusive manner probably created not just more value for themselves but even for the employees, in that manner. So go back directly to your question. In that sense, probably because of the situation that we have been in over the last 5 to 6 years, personally it didn't represent a big discontinuity for us. We were too busy trying to manage the discontinuities that some of the others were facing.
Thank you. Nice. So, Pankaj, the
Interesting, yeah.
cosmos is also entering into some core spaces.
Every space is a core space anyway. Because
Multi-core.
whatever seems to be at the end of it, unless you've changed internally, you can't change externally in any case.
So Ash, I mean, all of us are into fitness. So, his Pankaj's company earlier was People Builders. And then he said, people building ke pehle, the core has to be firm and tight. So then it's now become core. So that's like harder work, because we all know how hard it is to work the core.
No, absolutely. I think 99% of our strategy intervention is start with first trying to discover who you are.
Yeah, so true.
And until unless you can discover who you are, strategy is a lot shallow in that sense, right?
Beautiful.
And it's amazing. Even if you talk to, I don't know, even chairman of massive multi-billion-dollar corporations, and you ask them one simple question, they are talking to you about how do they want to be successful in this post-COVID or any scenario. And you're asking them, leave that aside. Why are you successful today? What has made you reach thus far? And the answers that you get are evidences. We did this, we did that. The answers are not attributes. This is what made us do it, or this was the core driver. This is what defines us. So I think the level of business self-awareness, and to borrow from Pankaj's own motto, core, is fairly low. As at least it's not articulated, even if it is felt internally.
Yeah, so true, so true. And some things are just not, we don't give mind to it. Just like we don't give mind to, health. When we kind of are on this whole professional journey, we're doing meetings late. We kind of just take so much of our, our health and what even enables us to get up and go to work so much for granted. So I think it's pretty much of a similar sort of a thing. So I just want to understand a little. Oh, so there's a poll ready. So I think you all had some questions. So let's look at what the audience is saying to some of the questions that we had. So maybe let's take a pause. It's about 11:20. So let's see. 12 months after the current crisis has blown over, what's the extent and nature of change you expect in your organization versus pre-COVID-19? High positive change, mid positive change, no change, mild negative change, and high negative change. Let's see what the audience, we have logged in about 8 participants, 23 participants, I beg your pardon, and there must be more watching on Facebook and YouTube live. Are we getting any responses? Yeah, so people are responding. Okay, so maybe, all right. So high to mid levels of change is 70%. Yeah, so that's an overwhelming vote towards massive change. So one, how do I now navigate the change? The new normal is going to be something that's on top of everyone's mind. Pankaj, what is the level of self-awareness that Ashutosh is talking about that you are picking up? Because you came with a more optimistic take on readiness and responsiveness.
So, okay, again, now, so the organizations we work with, where, just like Ashutosh, we do end up first getting the organizations to reflect within themselves. And once that journey begins, then in any case, they're far more aware and things begin to happen. But, overall, I still think there's a lack of awareness in terms of what needs to be done, how it needs to be done. But as I said, if the reflection journey has started, then a lot of them do reflect and talk about it. So, for example, in fact, one of the organizations, and while they're in the field of IT, surprisingly, they were saying that, look, post lockdown, none of us is going to work from home. Everyone will be in office. And the primary reason was that, especially for them, the newcomers, they gain a lot by social interaction and learning from their colleagues when they're in office. Right now, when they've joined in an offline mode, they're really struggling, and it's becoming a big challenge for them to keep them going. So now, of course, if there are already well-set jobs and what they need to do is so clear, that's all right. Those guys can work from home. But if they are not there in office when the new people join, then the new people don't learn. So as people are reflecting on that, I'm not too sure how many will really end up becoming jobs which are completely work from home, unless they're so well defined that they just don't need to interact with people, or they just need to come once in a while. So it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds. It may also perhaps throw up that actually a lot of roles were just not required. And we were doing things very inefficiently prior to this.
Also, so, Pankaj, building on the same point, one is when you start reflecting, different organizations have different mandates in terms of how much of the senior leaders' point of view can go out to public at large. So, there are policies in terms of, how much you can talk. A lot of senior leaders have been fairly media shy, or have not done anything in terms of creating, a presence on social media, or becoming or being thought leaders. We've always had, so yeah, there'll be individual maverick leaders, maybe one spokesperson, but sort of creating voice for the organization, which is authentic, which is sort of replayed by all of, let's say, the CXO level people within a large organization. So are you seeing some shifts over there? And this question is to both of you, Pankaj and Ash, on how much people are investing behind using this time to get digitally vocal, seen, and put out your thoughts in a transparent manner as an organization, and as individual leaders representing themselves / the organization.
Good question. And to be honest, I've not really paid attention to this aspect. Though I guess that in these times, there are more and more people are getting digitally aware, and so perhaps this will go up. But in all honesty, I've not really paid too much attention to be able to have a clear perception about whether there's a shift in this and there are more people voicing their opinions. So Ash, over to you if you have experience in this.
Sure. I think, our experience is slightly different on that count. We are finding a lot of organizations actually trying to enhance their level of readiness on this. So, from the normal, let us send out a newsletter or let us do a call to catch up scenario. To give you an example, one of the largest corporates in the country who's a client, they came over to us the other day and said, Ash, can you recommend somebody who can impart negotiation skills to our sales teams? I said, why do you need that? I'm sure your sales teams are anyway, right? He said, no, sorry, you misunderstood. We wanted in this digital remote scenario, because we are expecting a lot of deals to now be initiated and closed digitally without people ever meeting each other. I don't think, while even if our people are digitally very savvy, I don't think that they are, they are good enough or they are proficient enough to do digital negotiations on sales closures.
Wow.
Right? So another example, a beauty company, SME, right? They deal a lot in stylist training. They get in some of the world's marquee products into India, and they don't just trade in them. They provide a lot of, they create their own, regimens and solutions, and then do a lot of stylist training, right? They have been trying to figure out a way to do that remotely across all locations of large salon chains.
Okay.
Right? And they're trying to explain, okay, a Zoom call doesn't just work. It needs to be more multimedia. It needs to be interspersed with some, animated tutorials and video creation. I'm not sure if they've got the right answer, but I think that awareness of stuff like that being needed itself is quite interesting on one side. The other thing I think, which is also very, very interesting, which is leading to this, and to be interesting to see how organizations cope with that. See, on one side, things are bad and things are challenging, and there will be cost pressures, cash pressures, and that will force organizations to be very transactional.
Yeah.
As people return, right? In that sense, while there's always a sense of retaining your talent and being a little bit in a whole macro way welfare minded, while micro you are much more transactional, right? But what people are missing right now is that a lot of people are also going through their own periods of self-reflection.
Yes. Nice.
Whether this is what they wanted to do in life. So that mid-age crisis or existential questions of, am I doing things which I'm proud of, which I'm happy about, right? Am I on the constant treadmill, is being asked by an increasing number of, in this startup scenario, even very young people. Right? And what we expect, probably, this transactionalism on one side from the organizations, this reflection on the other side from the workforce, to kind of clash with each other over the next 12 months. Where will it resolve? How will it resolve? I don't know right now, because it will depend upon sector to sector, company to company.
Yeah.
Right. But because this period of reflection doesn't normally lead to actions immediately, it needs to delayed actions. Actions may happen over the next 2 years, 3 years, right? From the employee side. From the employer side, actions will happen on a shorter period of time, the next 6 to 9 months. So how would this dynamic play out could be very, very interesting to watch.
Nice. Very interesting. So my question, Ash, also is on this aspect of there used to be, let's say, the organization had one speaker, who would actually go out there and talk. So someone who was talking to the press. So I remember in the old days in Hindustan Lever, we had Irfan Khan, who was the head of communication. So everything, and he was a very powerful person. His office was right next to the boardroom, 5th floor. And there was a certain heft that came. Today, everybody is creating content, and organizations are, the employer value proposition is also getting created. And these are times when a lot of young people who really want to understand authentic purpose being spoken of is also an opportunity for the whole link to what Simon Sinek says, really the purpose. And then how do you communicate that? How do you then connect? So what businesses will do, how they will talk to potential customers, to partners. Today, you've got a digital canvas that's opened up, like you rightly said. There's this fast forward learning that companies have had to do, brands have had to do. So whether it's training on the one side or negotiation on the other side, it's also what's the voice that I'm talking about and how ready am I? Are you seeing the companies that you work with here globally, and this is for both of you, making some conscious attempt to build that social capital using this time for their own respective organization brands, as well as for leaders within their brands?
So if I may just start off on that, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Please go ahead.
So, in a way, Deepa, I think this people expressing themselves has been there now for quite some time. So whether it's Glassdoor or the other social media, people have been expressing themselves. What I don't know is whether the official version will still change, where multiple people can give official versions. Okay, so when you talk about an Irfan Khan, what he would say would be the official version of the organization. Whether that will shift significantly, I'm not so sure of. But yes, more and more people will start airing their perspectives about different aspects, different topics, including aspects about the organization. And hopefully, as the organizations start building a culture where people are on the same page and are involved, what they talk about is likely to have a synchronicity within them. If they don't do that, then in any case, you'll hear disparate voices. And it's not diverse voices. Okay, there's a difference between diverse voices and disparate voices.
Completely.
So that's what will begin to happen.
Thank you. Ash, your take?
Yeah, I think so there has been this whole interesting thing even pre-COVID, right? Where, let's say if you are an employee of a company, you're almost expected to talk about your company in your social feed. And which I think is insidious, by the way, because you're not paying the employee for that. You're not paying the employee to talk about the company. That employee has probably 10,000 followers. You are paying an external influencer, but just because that person happens to be an employee, you're not necessarily, treating it as valuable. You're treating it as default, so to say.
Nice.
Right? Now, a lot of people are incensed by that. Not about the fact not paying. I don't think that realization has dawned yet on people or on the corporates, but a lot of people who follow. So let's say your friend, you see on the Facebook feed of your friend 20 posts, out of which 12 posts are all dedicated to talking about initiatives of the company. And at some point of time, you start switching off and you start saying, hey, you're not my friend because I want to hear about your company. You're my friend because I want to hear about you. Right? Now, so there are these tensions out there which were already there pre-COVID.
Okay.
Right? Now, during COVID and post-COVID, as Pankaj rightly pointed out, people will try to drive, because the number of voices, I don't need to repeat that, have obviously multiplied. And there's a danger of they becoming disparate instead of diverse. Yes. So there will be a desire to further drive coherence. Now, imagine a scenario where you are taking advantage of your employee's social feed without as much as acknowledging, without as much as paying for that. On top of that, now you want to drive coherence. Where do you think, how would the employees push back? They're going to shut out the company.
Absolutely.
Right? They will say, hey, excuse me, I don't want to talk about the company at all now, any longer. Right? So this is going to be an interesting tussle which will find its own balancing point. That balancing point might be different for lower level employees, middle level employees, senior level employees, depending upon the stakes involved. That balancing point may be different from the nature of management of the company. Right? But I don't think that maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, monetizing your employees' social footprint could become a subject unto itself. With a definite science and an art behind that, rather than being an ad hoc kind of a venture that it tends to be currently. This will also get accelerated because, see, Indians have always lived, let's face it, Indians a bit like probably rank second only to Japanese, sorry for stereotyping, in terms of their obsession with their work life. Yeah. As things multiply, they are embracing multiple dimensions of existence. Now they are beginning to have a social life, personal life, community life, right? They're having more circles of influence beyond just their professional work front, right? To what extent do they want to keep these compartmentalized versus overlapping and allow their companies entry into other circles that they are part of? Would be interesting to see.
Very nice. Thank you. I love the way you brought in this parallel with the Japanese, is the office man and the Indian. So true. I want to touch upon the aspect of entrepreneurship and the gig economy, and also how it sort of interacts with large organizations, and what kind of pushes and pulls and possibly ways of new connections can form and fuse, also globally a lot more. There's like a whole creative soup that I can sort of visualize that's going to get created through all of these, and that's the reason why we also put both of you together over here to imagine this scenario. What do you really see as happening to the whole aspect of entrepreneurs, SME, MSME? You both of you have been players and participants in the gig economy also, in the way you've gone about creating your associates globally. Tell us a little bit about lessons for large organizations from what you've taken away of engaging with talent and working with small, mid, and uh, individual players, and what is the lessons there for companies that you consult with? Ash, you want to take that first?
Yeah, sure, no problem. I think the first lesson is that this whole concept, talent could be owned, talent could be collaborated with, talent could be contracted, talent could be part-time, talent could be full-time. I don't think I would even be talking like this 5 to 7 years back.
Correct.
Right? Talent was either you have it or you don't have it inside your organization. Right? So talent itself as I don't want to call it a commodity, but as something which is like much more amorphous, and it can have different levels of different types of engagement with you, is something that is dawning on a lot of people. To just give you a very simple example from consulting alone, because that's a business that Pankaj and I both do. Not too long back, the only way to do consulting in business was to create IPs. 5-10 people in an organization, in any organization, you can take the names of some of the biggest consultants in the world. 5-7 people will create IPs, and then you would have 2,000 strong people applying those IPs. Sometimes intelligently, sometimes not so intelligently, but generally IP application was not very customized, and hence there were some challenges of credibility, but they could not go away from it, because at the end of the day, how many good people can you have inside a consulting firm? 5, 10, 20? How many thinkers? But how do you scale up consulting as a business, right? But this was the pre-connected world. Today, on any expertise, on any competence, right? Even I'm not even talking about formal networks which exist for the purpose. Even informally in a connected world, I think any expertise is not more than 2 phone calls away.
Nice.
Right? And that has completely changed the consulting paradigm itself, because suddenly you can be small in manpower footprint, but you can be big in your ambitions and desires and the actual business that you do. Right. And IPs are important, but they are only important for your own efficiency and productivity. IPs is not the reason to sell. People are the reason to sell your proposition. Beautiful. Right? So I'm just taking one as an example where it has kind of fundamentally changing the entire, the entire dimension of how people are interacting and how people are gonna be looking at talent. Second thing is that there was this employer-employee relationship by and large, where employer was the evaluator of the employee's fit.
Nice.
To a clearly described role.
Yeah.
I think that was already changing, but that change will get accelerated from here on with the period of reflection, adversity, etc., that different people have gone, where slowly it would start becoming much more about, okay, what do you have to offer? How can you reinterpret the role according to your own attributes? Now, in that sense, the balance of power in any discussion between an employer and employee I'm not saying it will become a peer-peer discussion still, but it will start moving closer to that. The power distance between an employer and an employee discussion will reduce when it's not just the employer who's the evaluator in an interaction, right? It's as much as the interviewer who's being interviewed by the employee, prospective employee. So those are some of the changes that we see, and we do see some evidence of them happening. I think they might get accelerated.
Nice.
Over to Pankaj.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Ash. Interesting points. One of the things which you said, and I do see that happening, is that more and more things are going to happen through networks, right? And if there are networks, as you said, then one can expand, one can do a lot of things. The second point which you said, and which I completely resonate with, is really the aspect of, uh, you know, I don't have to be bound to some place because I need to, but because I resonate with what they do and it is something that I want to pursue. And the more that begins to happen, there'll be a far higher degree of mutuality in that relationship, and that's when it will work. So even large organizations, whether large or small, as long as that mutuality is experienced, where both are pursuing a similar set of values or certain purpose, is when things will begin to happen. I think that will be true whether it's a small organization or a large organization, but more so for large organizations because people will have multiple options to pursue in any.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it really boils down to the fit evaluation and then seeing whether there is an alignment in mindset, and that's going to be a two-way sort of a force. We are at the last 5 minutes of this segment. There is a question here that I'm going to ask. An anonymous attendee is asking, how would consultancy as a field change now that people in industry are educating, upskilling themselves? So basically, I think he's saying, will organizations need consultants? Maybe is that what you're saying? I don't know. Would consulting as a field change? And the second is, what is the preferred best practice method of growing networks, organically or through rigorous business development? So these are two questions that are coming in on growing networks and on how consulting per se will change. Anyone wants to take that one?
So let me quickly share this about the consulting piece. Almost reminds me of a point in time when my son said, "You mean people figure out, pay you to figure out what they know, and the day that happens, there'll be no role for you left." I said, "Yeah, that's very true. That'll be a great day to happen." Unfortunately, the way the human mind works, collectively, not everyone figures it out themselves. So to that extent, I do think there'll be a role for consultants and to bring in different perspectives and new perspectives and to get the organizations to reflect. So that piece, I don't think is going away in a hurry. Just upskilling will definitely help, but I don't see that as the only way to change things for consultants. If at all, it will be useful in that getting leveraged better by the consultants. That's how I would see.
Thank you.
Ash.
Yeah, sure. I think other than that, what I earlier said about consulting becoming much more network oriented rather than IP oriented, the second perspective, which is very interesting in consulting, is going to be, as a consequence of upskilling, organizations are going to bundle in capability building for their teams into consulting contracts, if not explicitly, then at least implicitly. The expectation would be, work with us, solve our problem, but solve our problem in a manner that is collaborative and much more visible to our people, so that we don't need you again and again.
Got it. Nice.
Right? So that's one thing that we do see will start happening in that sense. And so there are two kinds of consultants. Very transactive consultants, you take a brief, go away, find a solution, present the solution. Then the second is much more collaborative, where I will work with you to find a solution together. I think the latter would increase much, much more. The second part of the question was more about networking. I think broadly, networking done with the objective of networking never succeeds.
Yes.
In any case, networking done with the objective of building relationships and resonance, always succeeds in that sense. So organic sharing thoughts and creating resonance is a much better way than business development in any case.
So just to add to what Ash said, sorry, Deepa, what you spoke about collaboration is what we call co-creation. And that is, in fact, the whole essence of our work, co-creators, which is co-creation, to build that value for the organization, where they can then take it on themselves. Sorry, Deepa, over to you.
So there are a couple of questions which we might have to take offline with these people. And when we close, you will have links to these their respective companies. They're also on LinkedIn. So do continue the conversations with both these gentlemen. Ash, you had, when we met, I think when you were starting Cosmos, and we said, we're happy to be your back end, but we've never had we've never done active business development. So to go out there and to really seek business is not what we do. And this is really, business unusual for us, because what we've realized willy-nilly is just putting a platform like this and having a conversation and having so many clients, partners, associates, people that we worked with, people who sort of know us and who trust us. This kind of a curated conversation is, in a sense, a way of putting your work out there. And so many times in individual meetings and sessions, we would name you, Pankaj, and you've also been part of some projects, and we've named you, Ash. But what fine way than to actually hear these gentlemen talk and to get their perspective and to get exposed, if not to a small sliver of their mind, the depth of their thought, the width of their vision, as well as the kind of experience and expertise they bring with them. So thank you so much for kicking off these series, both of you, Pankaj and Ash, and for coming on to this talk show today, our Learning Monday. And I look forward to more conversations. What would have been, this is also for me, would have been a very selfish conversation of having a one-on-one chat with Pankaj over a meal or with Ash over a meal. And this is also altruism. This is about sharing both of you, if not to a shared meal that, our office would have fit maybe about 50 people at a point in time who'd come for a lunch buffet. But this way, so many of you are going to be exposed to both of you. So thank you so much, Pankaj and Ash, for coming here today and starting this, seeding these thoughts and ideas.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us over.
Thank you. It was a joy. Thank you. It was, I think your questions were quite incisive. And as you had promised, they made us think and put us in the reverse situation instead of asking questions, right? But we enjoyed it.
All of us need to do that, I guess.
No, we enjoyed it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks for this super session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye-bye.